There was a time when a man walked the same route home every evening. Each day he'd pass a large stone in the middle of his path. Each day he'd stumble against it, curse it, and continue on his way. For 30 years he never once considered moving the stone. 30 years of the same obstacle, the same frustration, the same result. Are you that man? Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. What stones are you stumbling over day after day, year after year, without ever deciding to move them out of your way? The world is filled with people living lives of quiet desperation. They wake up each morning hoping something will be different, yet they go to bed each night having done nothing to make it so. They are like ships without rudders, drifting aimlessly on the sea of life at the mercy of whatever current catches them. But that's not why you're here today. You're here because deep down, you know a fundamental truth. Nothing changes if you don't. Consider this. The mighty oak doesn't become magnificent by accident. It grows that way through persistent effort, reaching for the sunlight day after day, year after year. It doesn't wish to be tall. It simply grows, following the natural law of continuous improvement. Human progress follows the same principle. We advance not through wishes or complaints, but through purposeful, consistent action. Yet how many of us truly understand this? How many of us live by it? Look around at your life right now. Everything you see, your job, your relationships, your health, your financial situation, is the result of choices you've made or failed to make. The life you're living today is the sum total of your past decisions and actions. This might sound harsh, but it's also incredibly liberating. Because if your life is the result of your choices, then new choices can create a new life. Have you ever watched a farmer tend his fields? He doesn't plant seeds and then complain when they don't instantly become crops. He doesn't blame the soil or the sky. He knows that growth takes time, patience, and consistent care. He waters when it's dry. He weeds when it's necessary. He works with nature, not against it, understanding that the harvest comes to those who nurture growth over time. How different this is from how most people approach their lives. They plant seeds of intention on Monday and abandon them by Wednesday when no sprouts have appeared. They make half-hearted attempts at change, then quickly revert to old patterns when immediate results don't materialize. There was a man who decided at 40 that he wanted to learn to play the violin. His friends laughed. "At your age," they said, "it takes years to master the violin. You'll be an old man before you're any good." The man simply smiled and replied, "I'll be an old man someday whether I learn to play the violin or not. I might as well be an old man who can play the violin." 10 years later, he performed a solo at a community concert. Was he a virtuoso? No. But he played beautifully, bringing joy to himself and others. He understood that the passing of time is inevitable. What matters is what we do with that time. What dream have you postponed because you think it's too late? What goal have you abandoned because the path seemed too long? Remember this, the time will pass anyway. 5 years from now, you will be 5 years older, regardless of what you do. The question is, what will you have to show for those 5 years? There's a story about two lumberjacks competing to see who could cut down more trees in a day. The first man worked continuously, never taking a break, chopping tree after tree with determined force. The second stopped every hour to rest and sharpen his axe. At day's end, the second man had cut down twice as many trees. The first man was bewildered. "How did you cut more trees when you took so many breaks?" The second replied, "I wasn't just taking breaks, I was sharpening my axe." How sharp is your axe? Are you taking the time to improve your skills, to learn new approaches, to become more effective? Or are you just hacking away at life with a dull blade, working harder but accomplishing less? We live in a world that celebrates instant gratification. We want immediate results, quick fixes, overnight success. But genuine change doesn't work that way. Real transformation requires time, consistency, and often discomfort. Consider the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar doesn't gently transition into a butterfly. It dissolves completely, breaking down into a cellular soup before reconstructing itself into something entirely new. The process is messy, difficult, and essential for transformation. Your personal growth will feel the same way sometimes. Old habits, beliefs, and patterns need to dissolve before new ones can form. This dissolution can feel like failure. It can feel like everything is falling apart, but often this breaking down is a necessary prelude to breakthrough. Let me ask you, what's the price of your unfulfilled potential? What is it costing you to remain as you are day after day, year after year? Not just in dollars, but in happiness, in fulfillment, in contribution to others. There once was a woman who dreamed of writing a novel. For 20 years she told herself and others about this dream. She collected ideas. She bought beautiful notebooks. She read books about writing, but she never actually wrote more than a few pages. She always had a reason. Not enough time, not enough energy, not enough confidence. One day her daughter asked, "Mom, why don't you ever finish your book?" The question struck her like lightning. That evening she wrote 3 pages, the next day 3 more. 1 year later her manuscript was complete. It wasn't perfect, but it was finished. What changed? Not her circumstances, not her available time. Simply her decision to begin and to continue beginning day after day. What would happen if you approached your goals the same way? Not with grandiose plans or dramatic declarations, but with small, consistent actions taken daily. There's a false belief that motivation leads to action. That somehow, if we just feel inspired enough, we'll naturally do what needs to be done. But the truth often works in reverse. Action creates motivation. Start moving, and the momentum will follow. Have you ever noticed how the hardest part of exercise is simply getting to the gym? Or how the most difficult part of writing is sitting down at the desk? Once you're in motion, continuing is relatively easy. The key is to begin. A successful businessman was once asked the secret to his achievements. Many expected him to mention his education, connections, or strategic brilliance. Instead, he said simply, "I do what I say I'll do. If I tell someone I'll call them Tuesday, I call on Tuesday. If I commit to a deadline, I meet it." Most people don't do what they say they'll do. I've built a career on this simple difference. How reliably do you keep promises to yourself? Do you treat commitments to yourself with the same seriousness as commitments to others? Or are you quick to break your word when you're the only one who will know? Self-discipline isn't about punishment or deprivation. It's about self-respect. It's about proving to yourself that you can trust your own word. Each time you do what you said you would do, especially when it's difficult, you build confidence in your ability to direct your own life. Think of the most successful people you know. Are they necessarily the most talented, the most educated, the most privileged? Or are they the ones who consistently show up day after day, regardless of how they feel in the moment? Excellence isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. The writer who produces pages daily even when inspiration is lacking. The athlete who trains regularly even during the off-season. The entrepreneur who makes calls and solves problems even on difficult days. These people understand that feeling follows action, not the other way around. They don't wait for the right mood to strike. They create the right mood through deliberate behavior. The great irony is that what feels comfortable in the short term often leads to discomfort in the long term, and what feels uncomfortable in the short term often leads to comfort later on. The difficult conversation you're avoiding? Postponing it only prolongs your anxiety and allows the situation to worsen. The financial habits you're not changing? Maintaining them might feel easier today, but they're creating a future filled with stress and limitation. The health issues you're ignoring, they don't disappear because you refuse to address them, they compound. A study conducted with elderly people in their final days. When asked about their regrets, few mentioned things they did that turned out badly. Instead, they spoke of things they never attempted. Risks not taken, love not expressed, dreams not pursued. They regretted not the actions that failed, but the actions never taken. Will this be you? Will you look back from the vantage point of your final days and wish you had found the courage to change? Or will you reflect with satisfaction on a life deliberately shaped by your choices rather than your fears? There was a shoe salesman who was sent to a remote region to establish a market. After arriving, he sent a telegram back to his company. Situation hopeless. No one wears shoes here. The company sent another salesman to the same region. His telegram read, "Tremendous opportunity, no one has shoes yet." Same circumstances, entirely different perspectives. Which salesman are you? Do you see obstacles or opportunities? Do you focus on what's lacking or what's possible? Your perspective shapes your experience far more than your actual circumstances. There's a profound difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. Most people wish for better lives, improved circumstances, greater success. Wishing costs nothing. It requires no effort, no risk, no change. Being ready, however, requires transformation. It demands that you become the person who can not only achieve your goal, but sustain it. This is why lottery winners so often lose their fortunes and why crash dieters regain weight. They received something they weren't prepared to maintain. True change happens from the inside out. External circumstances follow internal shifts. When you change your thinking, you change your actions. When you change your actions, you change your results. What thoughts are you nurturing that keep you anchored to your current reality? What beliefs about yourself, about what's possible, about what you deserve, are holding you in place? There was a time when, as part of an experiment, healthy fish were placed in a tank with a glass divider separating them from their food. The fish repeatedly swam into the barrier, trying to reach the food, until eventually they stopped trying. When the divider was removed, the fish still didn't swim to the other side. They had learned that path was blocked, and they accepted this as unchangeable fact. How much of your life is governed by similar learned helplessness? How many barriers do you still honor long after they've been removed? How often do you tell yourself, "I can't," when the truth is simply that you haven't yet? Every significant achievement in human history began with someone believing they could do something that hadn't been done before. Your personal breakthroughs require the same conviction. This isn't about positive thinking as a magic formula. It's about a grounded optimism that acknowledges difficulties while maintaining focus on solutions rather than problems. It's about seeing yourself as an active creator of your circumstances rather than a passive victim of them. Let me share a fundamental truth. Your life moves in the direction of your most dominant thoughts. What you focus on expands. If you constantly dwell on what's wrong, what's lacking, what's impossible, that becomes your reality. If instead you direct your attention to opportunities, possibilities, and progress, however small, that becomes your experience. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical psychology. Your brain is designed to filter information, showing you evidence that confirms your existing beliefs while filtering out contradictory data. When you decide something is true, whether that belief serves you or not, your mind works diligently to prove you right. So I ask you, what beliefs are you asking your brain to validate? That change is too difficult, that you've tried before and failed, that people like you don't achieve things like that, or that you are capable, resilient, and resourceful enough to create the changes you desire? There's a wonderful story about a man who visited a construction site where 3 stonemasons were working. He asked each what they were doing. The first replied with frustration, "I'm cutting stones." The second answered, "I'm earning a living to support my family." The third looked up with shining eyes and said, "I'm building a cathedral that will stand for hundreds of years." Same task. 3 entirely different experiences. What determined the difference? Not the work itself, but the meaning each man assigned to it. How do you frame your daily activities? Do you see them as burdensome obligations or as meaningful contributions to a larger purpose? The way you answer this question profoundly affects your motivation, persistence, and fulfillment. Purpose is the great energizer. When you connect your actions to something larger than immediate gratification, when you understand how today's efforts serve tomorrow's vision, you find reserves of strength and determination you didn't know you possessed. What's your cathedral? What gives meaning to your daily stone cutting? If you can't answer this question clearly, perhaps this is where your transformation needs to begin. Because here's the truth. Lasting change requires both push and pull. You need to be pushed by dissatisfaction with present conditions and pulled by a compelling vision of the future. Without the push, you lack urgency. Without the pull, you lack direction. Are you clear about both what you're moving away from and what you're moving toward? Do you have a vision that's worth the discomfort of change? There was a study where researchers asked elderly people what they would do differently if they could live their lives over again. 3 answers appeared consistently. They would reflect more, risk more, and do more that would live on after they were gone. Reflect more, risk more, create a legacy. These answers reveal profound wisdom about what truly matters in a well-lived life. Reflection allows us to learn from experience rather than merely having experiences. It turns events into insights and insights into wisdom. Yet in our busy lives, how often do we make time for genuine reflection? How often do we ask ourselves the important questions rather than just reacting to urgent demands? Risk is the price of growth. Every meaningful advance in your life will require stepping into uncertainty, trying something new, becoming someone new. The alternative is stagnation, which isn't neutral but actively harmful to human flourishing. And legacy? This speaks to our deep need for significance, for knowing our lives matter beyond our immediate circumstances. What are you creating that will outlast you? What contribution are you making that extends beyond your personal comfort? These 3 elements, reflection, risk, and legacy, form a powerful framework for meaningful change. They address the past, present, and future of your existence. They connect your individual journey to the larger human story. There was a psychology experiment where participants were divided into 3 groups and asked to track their progress toward personal goals. The first group simply thought about the outcomes they wanted. The second group detailed the steps needed to achieve those outcomes. The third group did something different. They wrote about obstacles they expected to face and made specific plans for overcoming those obstacles. The results were revealing. The third group significantly outperformed the others in goal achievement. Why? Because they prepared for reality rather than fantasy. They understood that the path to meaningful change isn't smooth or straight, and they readied themselves accordingly. How prepared are you for the obstacles you'll inevitably face? Have you thought seriously about what might derail your efforts and how you'll respond when, not if, those challenges arise? This isn't negative thinking, it's strategic thinking. It's acknowledging that the road to any worthwhile destination includes setbacks, and that prior planning prevents poor performance. Think of it as installing shock absorbers before the bumpy ride begins. With proper preparation, obstacles become anticipated challenges rather than surprising catastrophes. What if you approach change not as a single dramatic event, but as a series of small, manageable adjustments? What if, instead of trying to revolutionize your life overnight, you focused on improving it by just 1% each day? This approach might seem insignificant in the short term. A 1% improvement is barely noticeable, but compound that 1% daily over a year, and the result isn't a 365% improvement. It's a 3,700% improvement due to the power of compounding. Small changes, consistently applied, create remarkable results over time. This is the principle behind all natural growth, from how trees add rings to how children develop into adults. Not through sudden leaps, but through persistent incremental progress. There once was a man who wanted to build a house. He had limited resources, so he decided to lay just 1 brick per day, but to lay it perfectly. Friends laughed at his approach. "At this rate, you'll never finish," they said. But the man continued, methodically placing 1 brick daily with careful attention to detail. After some time, his friends stopped laughing. They saw that while their hasty projects were constantly requiring repairs and revisions, his structure was solid, beautiful, and growing steadily toward completion. What's the one small action you could take today and then repeat tomorrow and the next day that would move you toward your most important goal? What's your 1 brick that laid consistently would eventually build the life you desire? The beauty of this approach is that it makes change accessible regardless of your current circumstances. You don't need extraordinary resources, abilities, or opportunities to improve by 1%. You simply need consistency and patience. There's a Native American tale about a grandfather telling his grandson about 2 wolves fighting within him, one representing fear, anger, and despair, the other representing courage, kindness, and hope. When the grandson asks which wolf will win, the grandfather replies simply, "The one you feed." Which aspects of yourself are you feeding each day? Which thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are you reinforcing through your attention and actions? Because whatever you nurture grows stronger, whether it serves you or not. This is why awareness is the first step in any genuine change. You must become conscious of your current patterns before you can alter them. You must notice what you're feeling, thinking, and doing without judgment before you can choose something different. Most people live on autopilot, reacting to life rather than creating it. They follow the same mental and behavioral scripts day after day, then wonder why tomorrow looks so much like yesterday. Awareness breaks this cycle. It creates a space between stimulus and response, a space where choice becomes possible. This is your point of power, the moment when you can decide whether to follow old patterns or forge new ones. Start by simply observing yourself with compassion. Notice your habitual responses to stress, to opportunity, to conflict. Don't try to change them immediately. Just become aware of what they are and how they affect your life. This practice alone will begin to transform you. As the psychologist Carl Jung observed, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. There was a woman who complained for years about her difficult boss, impossible workload, and toxic workplace. Her friends heard the same stories repeatedly, offering sympathy for her unfortunate situation. One day, a new friend responded differently. Instead of commiserating, she asked, "What are you getting from staying in this situation?" The question stopped the woman cold. For the first time, she considered what benefits she might be receiving from her misery, the sympathy it generated, the excuse it provided for other unfulfilled areas of her life, the familiar comfort of a known problem compared to the uncertain challenge of creating something better. Within 6 months of this realization, she had found a new position where she thrived, What are you getting from not changing? What secondary benefits might your current difficulties provide that make them oddly comfortable despite their obvious drawbacks? Until you identify these hidden payoffs, they will continue to anchor you to the status quo. This is why honesty with yourself is so crucial for transformation. Not brutal self-criticism, but clear-eyed self-awareness that acknowledges both your remarkable potential and your very human tendencies toward comfort and familiarity. The most significant changes often come not from trying harder within your current paradigm, but from stepping into an entirely new paradigm. It's not about doing the old thing better, it's about doing a new thing altogether. Think of the difference between trying to get more light by improving a candle versus installing electric lighting. One approach accepts fundamental limitations while seeking marginal improvements. The other transcends those limitations entirely. Where in your life are you focused on optimizing candles when you should be exploring electricity? Where have you accepted unnecessary constraints as fixed realities? Let me tell you about a fascinating experiment. Researchers placed fleas in a jar with a glass lid. Initially, the fleas jumped and hit the lid repeatedly. After a while, they adjusted their jumping height to avoid hitting the lid. Here's the incredible part. When the researchers then removed the lid, the fleas continued jumping only to their conditioned height. They had internalized a limitation that no longer existed. How many of your perceived limitations are like this? Glass lids from the past that have been removed but still control your behavior. How often do you stay within boundaries that exist only in your mind? There's a reason why travelers often experience breakthroughs in thinking. When you physically change your environment, you disrupt habitual patterns and create space for new perspectives. The same principle applies to intellectual and emotional environments. New inputs create new possibilities for output. What if you deliberately exposed yourself to ideas that challenge your assumptions? What if you sought out people who think differently than you do? What if you explored fields of knowledge outside your familiar territory? The most powerful catalyst for change is often a single new insight that makes the old way of operating suddenly seem limited or obsolete. But these insights rarely come from circling the same mental territory. They emerge from unexpected connections between previously unrelated ideas. There was a man who spent years trying to lose weight through increasingly restrictive diets. Each attempt followed the same pattern: initial success followed by inevitable rebound. One day, while watching his young daughter play, he had a realization. She moved constantly because it was fun, not because she was trying to exercise. This simple observation shifted his entire approach. He stopped focusing on diet alone and began exploring physical activities he genuinely enjoyed. 3 years later, he had maintained a 70-pound weight loss not through discipline and restriction, but through a transformed relationship with food and movement. What fundamental shift in perspective might transform your approach to your greatest challenge? What if the solution isn't trying harder but thinking differently? Consider this. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Every significant growth opportunity requires facing uncertainty, risking failure, experiencing vulnerability. There is no path to your desired future that doesn't pass through these uncomfortable territories. The question isn't whether you'll feel fear on the journey of change. You will. The question is what you'll do when you feel it. Will you retreat to safety or move toward growth despite the discomfort? Courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in the presence of fear. It's feeling the trembling in your body, the doubts in your mind, and proceeding anyway because the goal matters more than the discomfort. There was a time when a young woman dreamed of being a photographer, but was paralyzed by comparing her early efforts to the polished portfolios of established professionals. A mentor gave her transformative advice. The master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. With this new perspective, she began sharing her imperfect work, learning from feedback and improving through practice rather than waiting for perfection that would never arrive through inaction. What would you attempt if you gave yourself permission to be imperfect? What might you achieve if you valued progress over perfection? Because here's a truth that might set you free. Nobody who achieved anything worthwhile did so without passing through seasons of awkwardness, uncertainty, and failure. These aren't detours on the path to mastery, they are the path. The greatest obstacle to change isn't external circumstance, but internal resistance. It's not the mountain in your path, it's the pebble in your shoe. It's not what's happening around you, but what's happening within you. And this is actually good news, because while you may have limited control over external events, you have considerable influence over your internal responses. You can choose your attitude, you can direct your focus, you can change your behavior. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, expressed this profound truth. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This space, this moment of choice, exists for you in every situation, no matter how challenging your circumstances may be. It's available to you right now, in this moment, as you consider your own life and the changes you wish to create. The ancient philosopher Epictetus observed, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." This isn't resignation, but strategic focus, concentrating your energy where it can be most effective rather than dispersing it in futile resistance to immovable realities. What aspects of your situation can you influence, and which must you accept? Having the wisdom to know the difference and the courage to act on that wisdom is the essence of effective change. There once was a gardener renowned for his beautiful roses. When asked his secret, he said, "I focus as much on what I cut away as what I keep." He explained that removing dead wood, crossing branches, and spent blooms, though sometimes painful, was essential for the plant's health and productivity. What needs pruning in your life? What activities, relationships, or habits are draining energy that could be directed toward growth? What are you holding on to that's preventing you from reaching for something better? Sometimes the most significant change comes not from adding something new, but from removing what no longer serves you. Not from doing more, but from doing less with greater focus and intention. As we approach the conclusion of our time together, let me leave you with this final thought. The gap between where you are and where you could be is filled with decisions waiting to be made, actions waiting to be taken, realizations waiting to dawn. These decisions, actions, and realizations don't require extraordinary courage or ability. They simply require showing up day after day, making slightly better choices than you did yesterday, learning from both successes and failures, and maintaining faith in the compound effect of consistent effort. Remember, nothing changes if you don't. Not your circumstances, not your capabilities, not your character. But the corollary is equally true and infinitely more empowering. Everything can change when you do. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by wishing for wings, but by surrendering to a process of transformation. The seed doesn't become a tree by dreaming of height, but by steadily growing toward the light. The blank page doesn't become a story by hoping for words, but through the patient application of thought to expression. And you, with all your unique gifts, challenges, experiences, and possibilities, won't become your next and better self through passive hope, but through active, persistent change. Not through dramatic, unsustainable efforts, but through small, significant choices made consistently over time. Today marks a dividing line in your life, not because of what you've heard, but because of what you'll do. On one side lies the comfort of familiarity, of established patterns and predictable results. On the other side lies the discomfort of growth, the uncertainty of new behaviors, and the unlimited potential of a life deliberately created rather than passively accepted. The choice, as always, belongs to you, and your life will reflect that choice, for better or worse, with perfect accuracy. So I ask you one final time, what will you change, and when will you begin?